The year is 1492. Three ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, sail across the Atlantic. His captain, Christopher Columbus, an Italian born in Genoa in 1451, has convinced the Spanish monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, that he can reach Asia by sailing west. His dream is to find a faster trade route to the riches of the East, spices, silk, and gold, without passing through the Ottoman-controlled Mediterranean. Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon were not only monarchs, but also partners in marriage and politics. Their union in 1469 united two powerful kingdoms, creating the foundation of a unified Spain. Together, they ruled as the Catholic monarchs, sharing authority and working jointly on matters of state. Isabella was known for her strong will and vision, while Ferdinand excelled in diplomacy and military strategy. By 1492, their joint rule had achieved a major triumph, the Reconquista, the final expulsion of Muslim rule from Granada. This victory gave them confidence and resources to look outward towards global expansion. When Columbus approached them with his plan to sail west to Asia, it was Isabella's personal conviction and Ferdinand's political calculation that secured his support. The crown wanted Columbus to succeed because his voyage promised enormous rewards: new lands to expand Spain's empire, wealth to fund ambitions, prestige to rival Portugal, and the chance to spread Christianity. To show their confidence, they granted Columbus extraordinary privileges: noble titles, governorship of any lands he discovered, a share of future profits, and even a special favor, allowing prisoners and convicts to join his crew. This solved his recruitment problem, reduced the burden on prisons, and symbolized royal backing. For Columbus, it was proof that the monarchs were willing to bend rules to ensure his mission had the manpower it needed. Columbus's fleet was modest. The Nina and the Pinta were caravels, small, fast ships, while the Santa Maria was a larger carrack. Supplies included food, water, wine, hardened salted meat, and hacktard, enough for what he estimated would be a month-long voyage. His crew of about 90 men were sailors, adventurers, and prisoners offered freedom in exchange for service. Many were fearful, for no one knew how far the ocean stretched. The journey was grueling. The ships left Palos de la Frontera on August 3, 1492. Storms battered the fleet, food spoiled, and the crew grew restless. By early October, sailors threatened mutiny, fearing they would never see land again. Columbus calmed them with promises of riches and insisted land was near. Finally, on October 12th, a lookout named Rodrigo de Triana spotted land. Columbus stepped ashore on an island in the Bahamas, which he named San Salvador. He believed he had reached islands off Asia. In reality, he had encountered the Taino people, who lived in thriving communities across the Caribbean. Over the next months, Columbus explored Hispaniola and Cuba, marveling at the fertile land and the people's generosity. He returned to Spain in 1493, hailed as the man who had discovered a new world. He also later reached parts of Central and South America, but never set foot on the mainland of present-day USA. So why do we still hear that Columbus discovered America? His voyages symbolize the beginning of Europe's age of exploration, yet the USA's story belongs to Ponce de Leon, De Soto, Coronado, Cartier, Champlain, and countless indigenous peoples. Columbus opened the door, but others walked the land. Centuries earlier, around the year 1000, Leif Erikson and his Norse companions reached the coast of Newfoundland. At Onslow Meadows, archaeologists uncovered Viking houses, proof that Europeans touched North America nearly 500 years before Columbus. The term Vikings refers to seafaring people from Scandinavia who lived during the early Middle Ages, around 800 to 1100 AD. They came from regions that are now Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. The word Viking originally meant a pirate, raider, or explorer who went on sea expeditions. So Vikings means people who went on raids or voyages by sea. They were known for raiding and trading across Europe, exploring new lands, even reaching North America before Christopher Columbus. In 1513, Juan Ponce de Leon landed in Florida, naming it for its flowers. He became the first European to walk on land that is now part of the USA. Later, Hernando de Soto led an expedition through the southeast, crossing rivers and forests until he reached the mighty Mississippi in 1541. Meanwhile, Francisco Vázquez Coronado rode into the deserts of Arizona and New Mexico, searching for the fabled 7 cities of gold. These Spaniards were the true European explorers of the USA. By the mid-1500s, Jacques Cartier explored the St. Lawrence River, laying the foundation for French Canada. Samuel Champlain followed, founding Quebec and mapping the Great Lakes. Across the Atlantic, the English established Jamestown in 1607, the first permanent English colony in what would become the United States. Long before Europeans, the land was alive with civilizations. The Mississippian mound builders raised monumental earthworks at Cahokia. Pueblo peoples built stone cities in the Southwest. The Iroquois Confederacy created one of the world's oldest participatory democracies. Plains peoples lived in harmony with the buffalo, while the Pacific Northwest tribes carved totem poles and thrived on salmon. To call the land discovered is to forget the millions who already called it home. The arrival of Europeans brought devastation for the indigenous people. Diseases like smallpox, measles, and warfare, conquest and displacement destroyed communities and wiped out up to 90% of indigenous populations. Land was seized, cultures suppressed, and survival became a struggle. Yet native peoples resisted through revolts, alliances, and the preservation of traditions that endure to this day. As Europeans built colonies, they carried chains across the ocean. At first, indigenous peoples were enslaved under systems like the encomienda, forced to labor in mines and fields. But as populations collapsed, Europeans turned to Africa. On the shores of West Africa, captives were purchased from local rulers and traders, some prisoners of war, others kidnapped or sold. They were marched to coastal forts like Elmina Castle, held in dark dungeons, then forced onto ships. The Middle Passage was a nightmare, chained together, packed tightly, with little food or air. Disease spread quickly, and many died before reaching land. The term Middle Passage refers to the forced sea journey of enslaved Africans across the Atlantic Ocean. It was the second stage of the transatlantic slave trade. It connected West Africa to the Americas. Those who survived were sold at auctions in the Americas. Buyers inspected them like livestock, bidding for men, women, and children. On plantations, enslaved Africans worked from dawn to dusk in sugar, tobacco, rice, and later cotton. Punishments for resistance were brutal, but enslaved people preserved fragments of their heritage, songs, rhythms, stories, and faith that became the roots of African American culture. Slavery did not last forever. By the late 18th and 19th centuries, abolitionist movements grew stronger. Voices like Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and countless others demanded freedom. In Britain, the slave trade was abolished in 1807, and slavery itself ended in 1833. In the United States, the Civil War became the turning point. It was under the extraordinary circumstances of war that President Lincoln acted. The Union, the northern states loyal to the U.S., was fighting to preserve the nation against the Confederacy, which had seceded to protect slavery. The Union's armies were vast, but struggled against the South's determination and reliance on enslaved labor. Lincoln realized that ending slavery could serve two purposes: a moral declaration of freedom, and a strategic blow against the Confederacy's economy and war effort. By declaring enslaved people in Confederate territory free through the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863, Lincoln gave the Union cause a higher purpose. It transformed the war from a fight to preserve the Union into a fight for human liberty. It also encouraged thousands of enslaved people to flee plantations, weakening the South, and allowed African Americans to join the Union Army, strengthening its ranks. Finally, after the Union's victory in 1865, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery throughout the nation. The Union's triumph ensured that slavery ended not just in theory, but in law, reshaping the United States forever. The end of slavery was not the end of struggle. Freed people faced discrimination, segregation, and violence, but it marked a profound shift. The chains were broken, and the resilience of those who endured slavery became the foundation for future generations.